So Sego Sewaguego, we are now doing an interview with the Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe, Tribal Chief Michael Connors, and Darren Bonaparte, the Director of the Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe's Historical Preservation Office. So welcome, guys. How are you both doing?
Doing good today, thanks.
Good.
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be discussing the upcoming referendum for the name change. And so, Mike, we're going to start with you. Just give me a little bit of details as to what prompted the Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe to look at changing the name present day.
First, there's a long history regarding the name change, and we really need to jump backwards almost 20 years back to 2001. At that time, during one of the monthly meetings, this was during the time when the chiefs were Paul Thompson, Alma Ransom, and Hilda Smoke. At one of their monthly meetings, there was a motion on the floor then. Somebody brought up the idea to change the name of the tribe. And in the minutes at that time, it even talks about that it had been in discussion for several years at that point. Mm-hmm. So this goes back 20 years, more than 20 years. So at that time, council discussed it at the monthly meeting and among themselves. And they put forward a name, Akwesasne Mohawk Nation. And they changed the name from the Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe to the Akwesasne Mohawk Nation. And at the time, it caused a lot of controversy within the community here in Akwesasne, with the Mohawk Nation Council of Chiefs, and also with the Ganawage Traditional Council. Both of those entities objected to the name Akwesasne Mohawk Nation for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
At the time also, council put it to referendum, and there was some controversy around it because of the name nation. And the referendum then failed in 2002. It did not pass. So fast forward to approximately a year and a half ago, there was discussion on the floor of our monthly meeting, I believe it was in the spring of 2019, regarding the name Akwesasne, the history of the name Akwesasne. So we brought in Darren to do a presentation at a monthly meeting on the history of Akwesasne, the name. And he followed that up with another presentation and also a couple articles. But there was also discussion among the past couple of years among council members and also community members of changing the name again. They just naturally came back up nearly 20 years later.
Wow.
When we go on the road, we're often referred to as Saint Regis. We'll walk into a room and our lobbyist says, this congressperson said, Saint Regis is here. Is Saint Regis here? What does Saint Regis think in different meetings? And it just didn't sound right. We're being referred to as Saint Regis.
Yeah.
And we know why. We can understand why, because that's our name in the Federal Register. So that they shorten our name and they just call us Saint Regis. That happens in Albany, it happens in Washington, it happens when we have federal reps on the phone or in different meetings. I even heard it from locals here in Akwesasne.
Yeah, and I think that makes a good point because there is the Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe, and then you have Akwesasne, right? There's two names that kind of float around for the community, mm-hmm. And but then people will be like, well, isn't the Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe on the American side? They almost know to differentiate mm-hmm. the Canadian versus American.
Yeah, and also what we're looking for is a name that represents everybody in the community, every single person. The name Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe represents myself as a Catholic tribal member who goes to the Saint Regis Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. I'm a member there, I go there, I've always gone there since I was baptized, and I'm gonna go there until my funeral.
Yeah.
And nothing's gonna change that.
Right.
But it represents myself, but it doesn't represent everybody in Akwesasne. There's people who go to the Longhouse. The name Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe doesn't represent them as people. There's people who don't practice anything. The name Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe doesn't represent them. And as elected representatives of everybody in Akwesasne, I feel that we should have a name that represents every single person.
Right. So maybe, Darren, this is where you could possibly shed some light on just that name, Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe. And I know we're going to jump around a little bit here in this discussion, but where did that come from?
Well, it derives entirely from the Roman Catholic mission that was established here in 1754 and 1755. It was named after St. John Francis Regis, who was a French Jesuit, and he had died before he got a chance to come to North America to be a missionary to the Indians. And so they chose him to be the namesake for the mission. And it already had a name. This community was already known as Akwesasne. And we see that the evidence of that in 1760, when the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, was coming to a conclusion in this area. There was a big army of British soldiers heading this way, and to mop up what was left of New France. And so one of the British officers who were with this great big army heading our way was Captain John Knox. And in his journal, he mentions Sir William Johnson and his native allies coming to the village of Akwesasne. That's how he wrote it. That's how he heard it.
Mhm.
And to make peace with the natives who had been former allies of the French. So he came to the village of Saint Regis, or Akwesasne, and made peace with us, and then moved on to the Montreal area. And so the Sir William Johnson and his Indian Affairs Department, they made it a point to use native language. They all spoke Mohawk. And so when his agents came and dealt with us, they used our Mohawk name, our Ganyageha name. And so you see that all through the official record of the British government, and even the big general of this huge army, General Jeffrey Amherst, he also referred to it as Akwesasne, and it's in his writings.
Mhm.
So there's a variety of spellings, but it's the same word. And that was commonly used. And when they referred to the mission specifically, well, they call it Saint Regis. But as time went by, the officials on the outside stopped invoking the Mohawk name and just went with Saint Regis. It eventually became the coverall name for the whole community. And we became kind of the Saint Regis Indians.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until 1852 when Franklin B. Huff, a historian, came to Akwesasne, and he wanted to know what was the name, what was the origin of the name, what did it mean, and he recorded that. He asked people, and they gave him the oral traditions of the community. He wrote them down, and they were published. So, and the actual name Akwesasne refers to the ruffed grouse. A lot of people construe that to be a partridge, but it's the ruffed grouse, which is still very plentiful here in Akwesasne. Like if you go out in the woods, there's a good chance you might see one. And so that was the name of the river and the community. And the more fanciful translation is land where the partridge drums,
Mhm.
because when it mates, the ruffed grouse beats its wings to attract females, and it sounds like a propeller winding up. It's a very distinctive sound. I urge you to go online and look it up. There's recordings of it. If you're ever out in the woods and you hear that, you'll never forget that sound. It stops you dead in your tracks.
Mhm.
And the river, in the late winter and early spring, when the ice is built up around Akwesasne, because of all the rivers coming from the northern Adirondacks that converge in this area, the ice, big chunks of ice from upriver would bounce beneath the buildup of ice, and it created like an earthquake or a tremor that sounded a lot like the drumming of the ruffed grouse wings. So that's where they got that name for the place, was just because of the ice sounding like the ruffed grouse, and then the fact that there's a ton of ruffed grouse around. You can't get a more obvious name. So Franklin Huff wrote that all down, published it, and it kind of faded into obscurity because we're getting more heavily involved with government agencies and stuff, and they're all just going with St. Regis.
St. Regis,
So
yeah.
our Mohawk name kind of got, thrown in the scrap heap to the outside world. Of course, among us, we continue to use that term. It's fairly common, but it became the official term for us. And the reservation, there's a whole process of how that got kind of officialized by the government. And it turns out that it's not set in stone. The federal government allows people, communities, native communities, to change their name if they want. And there's been a lot of other communities that have changed their name to a more traditional thing. And so there's a process that they've had in place, and it's not that big a deal. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to petition Congress or anything like that. You just write a letter. Michael will probably tell you more about the specifics of how to do it.
Yeah.
But this council decided that, you know, we're going to actually lay that out for the people and let the people decide if they want to change it. So there were some options were put out, and we even asked people what they would recommend. And, you know, some people even put forward some joke suggestions. Like
Yeah,
there
I
was
saw some of that go down on social media.
Yeah, there was some real.
So now you're going to be having, so you take all that and you're going to be having this referendum coming up in November. I'm curious to know, how has the community overall, how have they reacted to the name change, and what are the options that are finalized for the referendum in November?
I think overall, the community is positive and in favor of it. With any issue, any controversial issue, you're going to have supporters and you're going to have people who are not supporters. And we hear from both. I hear from both supporters, and I read supporters, and I hear from non-supporters, and I read comments from non-supporters. So with any issue, that you're going to have that. But
Yeah.
I feel overall the community is ready for this and more in favor of this than they were in 2002. And a lot of time has passed. A lot of growing has happened in the community. A lot of cultural awareness has happened. And what this gives us an opportunity to be named who we are, and be named where we're from and where we sit. And it's an opportunity for the community to decide our name, not an outside entity giving us a name that honors an outside person.
Right.
We should be honoring ourselves.
Right. So what are the options that people will be able to vote on come November?
Well, the final option is Akwesasne Mohawk Tribe. So the referendum ballot will say, do you support the name change from Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe to Akwesasne Mohawk Tribe? Yes or no. So it's a simple yes or no when we get to the referendum date. And a yes vote is a vote for Akwesasne Mohawk Tribe, and a no vote is for the status quo, Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe, and everything will stay the same.
So what kind of reaction have you guys got to that name option?
Well, the name option was actually picked by the community. The first survey was, do we want to move forward with the name change? And the voting community who participated in an unofficial survey, they chose yes. So from the start, the community unofficially was in support. And the second survey led to the name. There were several names put forward in the first survey. In the second survey, I think there were 7 that were, it was nailed, final down to 7. And Akwesasne Mohawk Tribe was the highest vote getter in the unofficial survey. So the first 2 steps, the community was in support, and the community chose Akwesasne Mohawk Tribe. And now the community will formally choose which way we go.
Do you feel like you've done due diligence in terms of, giving the community all the resources they need in order to have a vote that has the history and also, put forth some options for the community to decide to move forward with this?
I feel so, because the community was in charge from the start. Do we move forward? And then what name do we choose? And then what name do we finalize with? And Darren's been involved from the start, also providing a lot of history, and that's his specialty, and that's why he's been pulled into the effort to give people the history. And that's also why we delayed the referendum from the June election until now in November, so that we can have a platform to provide the 3 required meetings to give the community more education, and as an education process.
And Darren, you also referenced 2 additional articles as part of your history presentation that people can also find on the tribe's portal.
Yep.
So what did they focus on? The history of the name also? And
Well, the first one was mostly like kind of an editorial where I'm saying, I asked the question, is it time for the Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe to change their name to embrace our heritage? And that was kind of laying out the, just the reasoning behind it. And then the follow-up was the Ganyanga Haga name of Akwesasne in the historical record. And so in that article, I referenced those British officers who were, you know, assigned to Akwesasne who used our name. And I think I have about 5 or 6 different references from the 1760s in which that name was referenced. So that's what that article is all about. So I've kind of kept an eye out for other things since then. And one of the things that I brought up last night, we had a community Zoom meeting about this with community members. And I started by listing a whole bunch of indigenous place names in New York State for towns, lakes, rivers, streams. They're all indigenous names. There's over 105 of them that you can find online. And like, you know, Ticonderoga, Oswego, there's an endless list. And if you check the statistics, there's probably hardly any Native people living in any of those towns. So why is it all these non-Native towns get to have Mohawk names, but here a Mohawk community, and we're stuck with the English version of a Frenchman's name? That just doesn't make any sense. I don't care how you shake it. But I got to tell you, there's a little bit of opposition to changing it. And there are people from the older generation that are very fond of that name. And actually a former chief, my Aunt Barbara Lazor, got on the meeting last night and expressed some fear about what if we change the name? Does that negate our treaties? Would we lose our reservation? Those are some of the fears that are out there, but as far as I am aware, that's unfounded. There's no threat to any kind of status or legal rights or anything like that that have anything to do with the treaties. The government doesn't negate your treaty just because you've changed your name to your Mohawk name. So, you know, we still have the same standing. It's just a matter of housekeeping for our community.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, Dante just let me know that we have like maybe about 5 minutes left. So is there anything else either of you think is important to add before we close our interview today?
I just want to add that when we get to the end of this, the community is deciding this. The tribal council is not deciding how it's going to end up. Tribal council did not decide the final name. The community decided to move forward. Our community decided the name to put forward, and our community is deciding which name we will end up with. Each of us has one vote. I have one vote that will go into this. I'm not going to decide this. Tribal council doesn't decide this. The community is deciding this in the end.
Okay. Darren, any final thoughts?
Well, I don't really have much more to add. I think I pretty much covered my perspective on it. This is one of those times that I'm grateful for the research that I've done for the last 30 years that is able to impact something that's going on in the modern context that will, you know, have a visible change. I hope when people see this, they'll stop thinking of Akwesasne as this, you know, divided community with the border through it. The border was laid on top of us. You know, we didn't locate on the border. It was located on top of us. So it's a way of for our people to kind of shake that little bit of that last vestige of colonialism, and to let the outside world know we're one community. You know, we may have two governments, but this is still one community. There's no North Akwesasne or South Akwesasne. It's just one Akwesasne, and it's a good place to be.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much. And people are going to be able to go and take a vote on November the 14th. And once again, that referendum for the official name change will go from the Saint Regis Mohawk Tribe to the Akwesasne Mohawk Tribe.
Yes.
And the community will surely have its say. So thanks a lot for joining us, you guys. I appreciate your time today. Nyawagoa.
Yo.
Yawa.
Ana.
Ana.